We've been doing all this week with Gail and looking at abuse programs such as Alcoholics Anonymous and the correlation with that and the forgiveness work, and she's with us again today. And we're excited to continue with this conversation. And we would love to hear your comments and your questions because that makes this your show. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. We're honored that you're here to join us for our conversation about this awesome ancient technology of healing. One of the things I appreciated that Gail shared with us on Monday is that the root of the 12th step program initially came out of a thing called the Oxford Group, which was a group practicing what was understood then to be first century Christianity, not today's, stories that passes the original teachings, but actually going back more to the first century and what was actually, for those who heard the words of Yeshua, had the tools of Yeshua, what it took to work through the issues that tend to run people's lives. And, one of the things we return to often is the recognition that perception, which is what informs us to do certain behaviors, is all based in calculations and computations made by the mind. We've been taught that we're looking through a set of windows on the world and we see what's happening out there, and that teaching is an absolute, total, complete, 100% proven scientific fraud. It's just not true. Once you recognize that, then you realize that your mind is always computing based on its content and constructing the world that you see. In fact, there's a CIA website where they have a study of perception, and quote from the CIA and their research on perception: "We do not record what is happening in the world, we construct the world that we see." So recognizing that we construct the world that we see, then you realize that the world you see, that you live in, though we think through our windows we're looking at the same thing, it's not true. We can be standing ostensibly looking at the same world, but the computation your mind makes based on your 1,000 generations of data produces a totally different perceptual world than that which my mind computes based on 1,000 generations of data. Recognizing that, the idea is to bring the perceptual system into the greatest harmony it can have with truth. And what we're speaking of, what we've been talking about all week, is the anonymous systems that have developed over the years to assist people in changing the computations made out of each individual's, we could say, multi-generational database, that 1,000 generations of data. What we know is that if fear or hostility enter into the process, it's been signaled that your computation is incorrect and will not serve your highest and best possibilities. It's a signal that it's time to deconstruct the result of your computations, and deconstructing the result of a perceptual computation made by your mind is called forgiveness. What the Greek culture has taught us is that forgiveness is about letting ourselves or somebody else off the hook for something that we have or have not done, when that has nothing whatsoever to do with forgiveness. Forgiveness is a tool for removing that which is in your mind that is at the root of your pain, for accessing and relieving yourself of the root of that pain. So the deconstruction process, the removal process, is called forgiveness. And as you enter into the process of forgiveness, you become freed from literally the capacity for hostility or fear. There are many systems that have been developed over the eons for teaching people to do that. One that has proven very powerful for those in the most dire of circumstances are the 12-step programs. And again, the root of that goes back to the first century language of Yeshua and the work that we're doing. And I was so delighted when I heard that from you, Gail, the root of the 12-step program. That's not something that I had heard before, because it's right back to here's how the game of life works, and here's how to remove yourself from pain, how to release yourself from what's at the root of all pain. And when you do that, you correct the error at the root of the mind's output, so the output improves, and that increases the possibility that the end result, perception, will serve your highest and best as a human being. All realities, all perception is based on generations of such computations, and so recognizing that the possibility for the introduction of error is endless. There's an infallible signal that will tell you your perception. Therefore, your mind is in error and needs repair, and that is if it produces hostility or fear. So it's in our best interest to deconstruct, that is, forgive as often as necessary until we arrive at flawless perception, a perception that sparkles with the active presence of love continuously, no matter what's happening in your world. People will say, well, that made me sad, that made me mad, that made me angry, that hurt me. That's all a lie. If I have hurt in my system, now, somebody comes up and punches me in the nose, cancel the thought, that's a little different situation. But short of somebody coming up and punching you in the nose, all hurt, all pain, all trauma is something that comes from that multi-generational database and its activity. When you correct the perceptual system, there's a word rakma in Aramaic. That was the word that was used to describe what was required to achieve what was called the first law. And it was have not love for the God neighbor as self, but rather maintain this condition of love in your mind, this condition of rakma in your mind, so that your perception sparkles with the presence of love, even in events that someone would say are very painful events. Once you get to the point where you can do that, then you know you are well along in your process of healing. We mentioned Jonas Salk yesterday, and one of the quotes that I love from Jonas Salk is, he said, and of course he's the inventor of the Salk vaccine, he says, our greatest responsibility is to be good ancestors. How do you be a good ancestor? You do the work of cleaning up your perceptual system so that the one that you pass on to the next generation is clean, it's clear, it's going to give that next generation the best possible chance of really, truly living as a human life. And when you think about it, who makes the great breakthroughs in this world of human endeavor? It's those whose computations that create reality, the output of the mind, are based in truth and love. The rest are mired in insanity, loveless minds based in hostility or fear, and healing looks like the removal, the forgiveness of what never belonged. So that's what we're here to support, and let's say hello to Gail. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate the input you're giving to us. I was talking to another gentleman who has been doing the work for quite some time now, and shared with him what was happening, and he wasn't able to be in the involved in the shows earlier in the week. He was involved in some meetings, but last night about 11:30, he having been in AA programs for 20 years or more, he texted me and said he was listening to the second hour, and he just was in love with what was happening in the show. So lots of folks are really responding to that, and welcome. Glad that you're here once again.
Great. Well, I am very grateful to be a part of all of this and to be invited to contribute the pieces of the puzzle that I have to offer. So that's awesome. Awesome.
Honored.
Yeah, same here. And that was a great lead. That's what we call, like when somebody speaks for the first, 10, 15 minutes in a meeting, we call those a lead. So that was a great lead, which it ties in perfectly with what I was going to bring today. And that was to start looking at what the inventory process and 12-step programs look like versus what it looks like on the sheet. And we've all agreed so far that the sheet, the wake-up sheet, is an inventory in itself. But there is also an inventory within the inventory on the wake-up sheet that is similar to what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'd like to point out
Tell us about
also. Oh, what did you say? I'm sorry.
I was just saying, great. Tell us about it.
Oh, okay, gotcha. One of the things that I do want to point out is that the way I was taught to do the inventory process comes out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Other 12-step groups have different ways of doing their inventory, and I want to acknowledge that as well. How I've been taught how to do the inventory process is that it's a 14-step or 14-column process, and what is addressed in the inventory process is resentments, fear, sex conduct, and harms done to others. And so there's 4 sheets with that, and also there's a written exercise for the sex inventory part. And I was just going to start with the resentment part. There's four columns that we do, and we do it by column. We go down instead of going across. And in the first column, we write down the name of the people that we have resentments against. And so we write down that list, and we do a lot of prayer before that, ask God to reveal to us who we need to write down, what we need to look at. In the second column, we write down why we're angry at them. So what I usually have people do is I have them write down a list on a separate piece of paper, and then when we get to the sheets, have them write down the name and then what they did so they have enough room, and then write down the next name after they're done with writing down what they did. And then the next column, what we look at is what part of self was threatened. And there's seven different parts of self. And that is self-esteem, which is what we think of ourselves, pride, and that's what we think other people think about us, emotional security, pocketbook, which would be our finances or material, ambitions, and that would be our ambitions are where we think we should be in different societies or family systems or in school or at our job, personal relations, and sex relations. And the thinking here is that if we are God-centered, or as we say in the Aramaic system, if we're able to express ourselves as being love, then what other people do outside of us does not affect. And so the premise here, too, is that if we're God-centered, we're not going to be affected by what other people do. But if we're self-centered, we need to examine how we've allowed ourselves to be affected by examining those seven things. And then in the fourth column, we start to turn this back on ourselves and to examine what our thinking is, and to start to examine how we might have set different such situations in motion. So we're starting to go inside instead of projecting out there what they did to me or and how I've been affected by what they did. It's now we ask ourselves 5 questions, and then we start to write about how we set this in motion. And the 5 questions are: where was I dishonest, selfish, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate? And that tells me here goals. What goals did I have for you? And then after we ask those questions about different situations, then we're able to look at ourselves and to see where we were at fault, or to blame, or to start take responsibility for our own thinking and how we put ourselves or manifested that situation. And I'm going to give an example of what this might look like. And I do the same thing that you do as well, how you have the same example for Sally and how she's angry at her boss. I have the same example as well, and I was thrilled that you do that because when I'm, showing, or I don't want to say teaching, but teaching or demonstrating how to work the steps, I use the same example as well. So anyway, the example that I use every single time that I present this piece is, of course, the father of my children, my ex, so to speak. I'm not supposed to call him the ex anymore, but his name is Kyle, and so I put his name in the first thing. What he did, he cheated on me. He was very abusive. He never got sober in our relationship, and the list goes on. What did he affect? He affected everything. He affected self-esteem, pride, emotional security, pocketbook, ambitions, personal relations, and sex relations for sure. And then when I started to turn this back on me, where was I dishonest, selfish, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate? I could say I was dishonest with him because I wasn't able to be me with him. And so that was one way of being dishonest with him. The way that I was selfish with him is that I did not acknowledge his disease as being a disease. I was selfish because I wanted his 100% attention, and if he couldn't give it to me the way that I wanted it, then I would cheat on him. I would seek that attention someplace else. So that was how I was selfish, is in that way. Self-seeking is still wanting all of his attention. I was very addicted to the father of my children and was very much addicted to the attention that he gave me when he gave it to me in a certain way. And so I was constantly seeking that or trying to get that from him because I wasn't comfortable or had how did you say that the other day, had pain that I was trying to reconcile through our relationship and being addicted to him. Frightened, I was constantly frightened in that relationship. But the primary fear that I entered that relationship in was I didn't feel like I could be me. I felt like I had to be somebody else. So he was in a relationship with the false me, with the real Gail. Please stand up. And I was frightened in all relationships to be the real authentic self because of fear of rejection. What if you really do reject the real me? And then inconsiderate, I was totally and completely inconsiderate of his needs. And the primary thing for me is that I wanted to save him and thinking that if I saved him that he would save me. So
and saving
me back,
him
or
meant,
he would be so much in love with me that he would not leave.
And what would saving him look like? Having him behave the way you wanted him to behave?
Exactly. He would get clean, he would get sober, he would be this perfect guy, and yeah, exactly. So it was my agenda on saving him.
Yeah, of course, the perfect guy would be the guy who does what I want him to do, not necessarily anything to do with him, because in the same way you're talking about I wasn't allowed to be me, notice that I could not allow him to be him. He had to be the perfect guy. And I think that happens so commonly in relationship as a result of our power person experience, that at a very early age, we learn that who we are is not acceptable. And therefore, we try to do an assessment in each situation of who does this person need for me to be in order to, quote, unquote, love me, which actually means approve of me. And the lengths that people will go to be approved of are just amazing. And so we give up the true self, and then, of course, having given up the true self long before we met the person we're currently in relationship with, in the non-being state of mind, there's always a desire to blame that person for the fact that I'm still doing what I learned to do probably by the time I was 4. And And when we speak about, somebody hurting us or making us angry or whatever, nobody's ever hurt any. Again, short of punching somebody in the nose, nobody's ever hurt anybody or made anybody angry. But if there's anger in there, certainly there's going to be a whole parade of people who can bring it up. And when I move out
Absolutely.
of the blame game and into taking responsibility, that's when I can start to go, oh, this is mine. I'm going to pull this one out and throw it away by the root, rather than let them off the hook for the fact that it's in there inside of me.
And the fact that we list everybody's names that we have, I most definitely, when I did my first inventory, I was able to see, with the aid of a sponsor, when I did my fifth step, was able to see the pattern and was able to trace that back to my father. Definitely the need to, having been abandoned by my father at the age of 5 with a divorce, and him being a Vietnam vet and being able to get his needs met through my mother, what he thought he needed to have his needs met, and being told that your father wouldn't have left if you were a boy, et cetera, et cetera. I did get to the place where I felt like I needed to save both of my parents in order to change them so they would be better parents and meet my needs. So that is most definitely a cycle of behavior that I was able to look at by doing this inventory and also doing the fifth step and talking to a sponsor who was able to identify the cycle or the pattern as well. So just to give an example of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's interesting how deeply we can fool ourselves and why it's so important to have a sponsor or have someone who will guide us through the process, because the inherent nature of what we call in this work, of course, the non-being mind, is blockage of truth. And everybody's got a story for everything that happens in their world, and their story is usually about somebody else or about themselves, and not in a responsible way, but rather in a blaming way. And so having someone outside of yourself who can flip back to you your words, your thoughts, your behaviors, your patterns is such a big and important step in the process, because that blockage of truth is just so deeply ingrained in each mind. And to move out of, as we said yesterday, the Oxford group and worked with the book of James, and James so clearly says, you've got to stop your denial. I mean, there's the root of the whole recovery program, is stop your denial. There's the root of the forgiveness process. As long as and our definition of denial is when I think or speak as though something outside of me is causing something to happen inside of me, I'm in denial. And the part of me that now I need to contact and heal, I've dissociated from. And all this work is about recovering, recapturing the dissociated parts of the mind and bringing them to love for healing.
Agreed.
Cool. Go for it.
The next part of the inventory process is looking at our fears, and we write down our fears in one column, and then in the second column we write down the same thing. How has self-reliance instead of God-reliance allowed me to have these areas of my life affected. And same thing, looking at self-esteem, pride, emotional security, pocketbook, ambitions, personal relations, and sex relations. And then the third column with the fear is to examine what it might have looked like if I would have been more God-centered. And for instance, one of my fears that I wrote down is going to the store. I don't like going to the store. And the big part of me going to the store is being in crowds and not being able to concentrate. The attention deficit disorder, just having so many different stimuli and distractions that I have a difficult time concentrating on what I need to buy and how much I can spend, and so I don't like going. And So I write that down, going to the store, what does it affect? And then I examine if instead of using my survival skills in order to go to the store, if I become more God-centered and start to rely on God to go to the store, what would that look like? And to start to really address the fear, look at it instead of reacting to it. So that is the purpose of Killer Sheet, or that particular area of the inventory that we look at. We also look at the inventory. We also look at fear in the resentment part too, where it asks where were we frightened. And when I did my first inventory, I saw fear all over every single name that I wrote down. There was fear involved in every single place. It also talks about, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about fear being an all-encompassing thread that I'm not even quoting it right, but it reaches every part of our existence. It touches everything. And I was able to finally, me as an alcoholic that would be willing to jump on a bar stool and start dancing or get into the first fight I could get into, I did not think that I didn't think that I had any fear, and this was very enlightening. The second inventory I did with a sponsor at 2 years of sobriety, I think approaching 3, very much pointed out my fear. And one of my biggest fears, besides going to the store, was fear of being alone. And that fear of being alone and not being able to face myself or be comfortable enough to be alone with myself, always needing that distraction, was very enlightening for me, and that enabled me to get out of that 16-year extremely abusive revolving door relationship that I was in, because my fear of being alone outweighed my fear of getting beat up or what other things were going on in that relationship.
That's quite a catch-22. I have a fear of being with people, and I have a fear of being alone. Maybe the truth is I don't have a fear of anything. I just have fear. That's why it's all pervasive, because the fear literally is the filter that we look through. It isn't something we have about this person or that one or that one. It's just a filter that we look through. And I think oftentimes the reason for what's called attention deficit disorder has nothing to do with the disorder, has nothing to do with an error in the brain. It has to do with one who came up in such a threatening environment that in order to feel the least bit safe, they had to be continuously on guard and observing the environment, because they didn't know when they were going to be blindsided. And so when one comes to the point of trust, when one will move into trust that there is an energy field in which we live, move, and have our being, and we can listen to that and trust, then we're going to be informed if there's something to be aware of, and we're going to be informed as to exactly what behavior will have us survive optimally if we can listen to that, rather than the mind, which is constantly looking, darting from place to place to place in order to try to assuage its fear, going to the root of the fear and removing it, and no longer looking through that filter opens a whole different space in us. So, a powerful way to approach it, to come from that inventory. I'd never heard that detailed an aspect of the inventory. That's powerful.
That's why I wanted to, that's why I wanted to present it, because a lot of people have a lot of misnomers, and you've said that yourself, of AA, of the steps, of the AA history, where it comes from, and also there's a lot of misconceptions about the inventory process as well. And
right, well, carry on. Tell us more.
Itself, the next thing that we look at is sex conduct. And because you take self-centered fear and you combine sex conduct with that, and that is most definitely a recipe for disaster. For me, this is the worst way that I could hurt somebody else and hurt myself as well. And once again, we write down, and this takes a little bit different of a turn, this isn't so much about what they did to me in a relationship or a sexual context. This is what I did to them. And so we write down who did we hurt, and then and what we did to them. And a lot of the questions for here is, did we provoke jealousy? Did we remain faithful? And so the next thing is that we'd write down is, whom did we hurt? How did we hurt them? And then what did it affect again? What part of self? Why were we justifying doing what we did in this arena? And once again, the same questions of what was affected is self-esteem, pride, emotional security, pocketbook ambition, personal relations, and sex relations. And then I'm going to back up for a second. Every step has a prayer and a promise. And what I mean by that is that there's a prayer to proceed, and there's also promises that after we do this, that this is what we're going to receive after we do this. And there is a third step prayer that we do, and there are also 4-step prayers. There is the resentment prayer, which asks us to keep us from being angry, help us to see that the other person is sick as well. There's a fear prayer that asks God to remove our fear so we can be who you need us to be. And there's 3 sex prayers. And prayers is that we ask God to mold our ideals and to help us live up to them. We ask God in meditation what we should do in each specific matter, and we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for the strength to do the right thing. And so we examine in the sex part of the inventory, we look at what we did to them and look inside of us and I start to see a pattern of, if I couldn't get the kind of attention the way that I wanted the attention, then I would move on to the next person. And thinking that, even though it was the next person, it's obviously a change in effects. It's not looking at myself and my thinking and addressing my beliefs and what's inside of me. It's just trying to get a void filled by somebody else or a chemical. So that was very enlightening as well, to see that pattern in all my relationships, starting from my very first crush in the 3rd grade and my expectations of him and how I behaved, and up on to adulthood, looking at those behaviors and those expectations and those goals that I had for them.
I think that a good corollary to that comes from this work on our healing through relationships and codependence work is to recognize that the real purpose of relationship, the real purpose of the body, is to incarnate as love, and the real purpose of relationship is to learn to function as love and hold a space of love in interaction with another person. And that moving on to the next person pretends to be easy in terms of, oh, well, if this one isn't, just doing what I want them to do and they're not perfect, which, of course, is a reflection of my own imperfection, I go on and find somebody else who will be perfect, and, of course, they won't be, and the next one won't, and the next one won't, because I'm not. And the power of really being in fully committed relationship is that you have to go to depth in yourself and be looking at, and if you're doing your work in the context of the relationship, then the integrity of that single committed relationship that supports you in going to depth inside of yourself and working with the reflections that come within the context of relationship, the things that surface in the context of relationship, and the depth of intimacy that comes from not flitting the mind from one place to another, one relationship to another, to another, to another, which is simply the avoidance of going to depth in self. So again, sounds like it really perfectly complements exactly what we've developed in the codependence work. Perfect.
Absolutely, and agreed. The next part for the sex conduct, or looking at our sex conduct, is that we write a list on a separate piece of paper about what we want. We ask God to mold our ideals and to live up to them. And so we write down our ideals about what we want in a relationship. And if we write down honesty, I was kind of tricked into this. My first sponsor had me do this. And I write all these things down that I want. And, I want honesty, I want loyalty, I want somebody that is trustworthy, I want somebody that I can laugh and have fun with, and want somebody that works the steps and is in the program and is committed to their recovery. And as soon as I wrote those all down and shared them with her, she's like, well, you have to be these too. It's like, damn.
Exactly.
It was like, if you want this, you have to be this. You have to do this as well.
Well, and the truth is, is that bringing something up for you?
Yeah, I'm coughing.
The truth is, the only place you can get it is inside yourself. Nobody else can give it to you. Someone else can support you in having it inside yourself. And as you give it as a gift, you get to receive it. And as they give it as a gift, they get to receive it. And that's the power of working in relationship. It's so awesome.
Yeah, it is. I loved it. At first it was like, and then I was like, okay, I get this. So if I want it, I need to do it.
Great.
And this was an exercise that I brought forth when I was a substance abuse counselor in the prison. I did this with the guys as well. And it was great. It was great for them to start to examine that for themselves. The last part that we do in the inventory process is that we look at harms done to others. And this is people or places or things that we don't have a resentment attached to, we don't necessarily have a fear attached to, and we don't have sexual contact. None of that. It's just random acts of harm that we might have just done either in an inebriated state or in a very selfish state of mind. That would be like, bitching out the Walmart checker because she just wasn't going fast enough, and or running down somebody that's trying to cross the street, or just being very, flipping off somebody at a four-way stop, or just that kind of, being inconsiderate and being extremely selfish, and it being all about me and acting out to those people, because guilt, shame, and remorse also blocks us off from God. So being able to list those people that we have harmed, that we don't have the other things attached to, is helpful as well. And
another way to say that from the context of the why is this happening to me again work would be, I need to start to look at all the places in my life where I have given up my human life in order to behave in a way other than human. And that becomes the reflection that shows me in order to flip somebody off of the four-way, I had to give up love in myself. Why would I do that to myself? Well, I don't deserve it. I don't have it. I've never had it. I can never be it. Whatever that whole story is about. And then once again, of course, back to the forgiveness process, the reality management wake-up sheet, to start to remove the dynamics that take me out of the presence of love. So that inventory, too, is another very powerful reflection.
Agreed. So we'll go on to step 5. Step 5 is we admitted to ourselves and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Wait, did I say that all? We admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. And what I see in the wake-up sheet, the forming of the goal for me and the canceling of the goal for me would be similar for me in the fourth column of the 4th step, starting to examine the goals that I have for other people, and starting to canceling those goals for other people I see as that being the interwoven part of the fourth step. And the fourth step being, I don't think I've said it out loud, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And that means, by looking up all the words, is that we are on a fact-finding and fact-facing proposition or mission. We're just looking at the facts of our behavior and our thinking. And so to get down to the fifth step is they talk about in the big book, basically just go find anybody to talk about this with. Now they're saying it's better to do it with a sponsor, so a sponsor could get to know you. And it is most definitely a skill set to listen to a fifth step. Instead of allowing somebody to get into the what they did to me, it's a time to get the mirror out and have them look in the mirror. And I was thrilled with your talk about mirrors as well. You know, the timing of being John the Baptist, to either put the mirror up there or to duck. We use mirrors as well, and the sponsor is a perfect person, if they have the skill set, to get that mirror up there and to gently point out our character defects and how we've set our circumstances in motion that have put us in the position that we've put ourselves in to be hurt. And there's three parts to that: talking to God, talking to ourselves, admitting to God, admitting to ourselves, and to another human being. I see the admittance to God and admittance to self in this, I invite in Ruka Dakucha to incline me towards healing, and what happens in 5B to be a part of that fifth step, because it's most definitely, we're inviting in Ruka to show us these things, or admitting to her to have them removed, but also we're talking to ourselves as well. And then when I process with you, or I process with Jeannie, or if I'm at an intensive and we're in the back room with me and Susan are in the back room processing, that's when we talk to another human being about what we've discovered in doing the wake-up sheet. So those are my thoughts there.
Perfect. I think that also one of the reasons for having, and I would assume this probably would tie in more with the idea of a sponsor, of the person you're going to share this with, is someone who is capable of being the space of active present love, can shine that active presence of love into the mind so that I can see deeper in my mind, and what I access in the presence of that love begins to heal. I don't need to be bearing my deepest soul secrets to somebody who's going to go puke it around the neighborhood and or is going to throw it back in my face in a way that doesn't support healing. So that's powerful. And I just realized that I got a text from Jeannie saying that Magda had her hand up. Let's check and see if Magda still has her hand up. She's got a thought for us. Yes. Magda?
Magda, you're on.
Hi, everybody.
Hey there, young lady.
Hi, I do have a question for you. Yesterday you were talking a little bit about responsibility communication, and I know you said you're going to go into that a little bit more on Monday. However, I have a question for you today, because I'm going to be working with Scott in a little while doing some role-playing with responsibility communication. And I realized that I need more clarification for step number 4, if you would be willing to depart from the conversation you're having now and explain that quickly, and then I'll get off the line and let you go back to what you're doing.
Do you have a specific refinement, specific question about it, Magda?
Yeah. I thought that I've heard you recently say, when you've explained this to new people, that in number 4, when you say what I want, that in some way that could be a request, like what I want from you, other than support, is to do this or that or that. And
no.
That not being problem solving, not about I need you to change this way, but I'm a little bit more confused than I thought I was before.
Okay. Excuse the siren going by. I'm sitting outside the car, but Step 4 there, the request is always related to the support I'm looking for, the input I'm looking for healing. So it's not a request I'm going to make of you that you do something or don't do something. It would always be, I've laid out a scenario. I've acknowledged that I have a problem. I have an issue that I'd like support and healing. And then the step 4 is, do you have any ideas that will support me in my healing process? That's the strict meaning of that step. It doesn't go outside of that realm. What, it might be, your suggestion might be, let's do a worksheet together, let's breathe, let's do the commitment, let's do, a codependent sheet, so that
Michael,
would be what that one's
about. I think that's number 5.
Ma'am.
Do you have any ideas with number 5?
Okay, I understood you to say that what you're asking for.
Number 4.
I don't have the sheet in front of me,
yeah,
but that's why I was
different
asking
from number 5? Maybe that's what I need to ask. Because in number 5 it says, do you have any ideas?
Right.
And so I guess I'm not sure what number 4 is. Is it to set the person up for number 5? That I want your support in helping me to heal this? And then number 5, do you have any ideas?
Well, I'm not sure where you're going with the question. Was that you were asking something of them? That's why I was asking for clarification.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I sat that recently. Sometime during the summer, I heard you referring to step 4, what I want, and that is where you could request something of the other person.
Oh.
And that was the first time I heard it. So did I miss here?
Yeah. What I want is support in my healing. So in that step,
okay.
I'm being really clear that my request, as opposed to I want you to change or something external needs to change, that step is
right.
about clarifying my issue and then asking for support in healing that issue and being really clear. The only place to go for a request in that is the request for support in my healing process. And then in step 5 would be the specific of what might that look like, the worksheet or what have you.
Gotcha. All right, fine. Well, then I heard the wrong thing or whatever. So thank you very much for the clarification. All right, thank you so much.
Cool.
You guys all have a wonderful weekend and continue with your. Well, this is the last day, isn't it? It's been a great week for the subject and topic that you've been talking about. So continue. Okay.
No, nice to hear your voice, Magda.
You too. Yeah, you're doing a great job. Take care, dear.
I miss you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you.
All right, blessings. And, it ties, that whole question ties right in with exactly what we're talking about with the inventory, because I'm really sitting in front of a sponsor asking them to reflect to me what they see that is my work so that I can get clear on what I'm in blocks to truth about and what I need to clean up inside of me. So, in the context of the communication, did you hear what I think I said, workshop, what we point out is that oftentimes all that people are interested in is problem solving. Gee, you came home, you frightened me, I'm scared, it's your fault. How about if you never come home like that again? I'm going to solve that problem. Where the clarity is to shift out of I'm going to solve the problem that you caused by coming home that way. The clarity is I want to step into my healing. So I realize that you came home a certain way, and maybe I could point out and prove to you that it's inappropriate, but that's beside the point. The truth is I would interfere. So what I'm looking to do is to understand the root of my fear and to heal the root of my fear. And so what I'm asking for in that step is always, in the focal point being always looking for support in my healing process, as opposed to the change that I think will make it all go away and then I won't have to deal with it.
Absolutely.
So it fits very well with this right here at this juncture with the inventory and And having that person in front of me that can really, truly, having done their work, hold the space for me to go through that piece of my work. It's pretty awesome.
And they share, and I share when I listen to Fifth Steps, I share my experience as well. I don't become an expert on this. I share my experience because we have the same experiences and how that went and what I did in order to, make that better for myself. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the confidentiality is most definitely very, very, very important.
Yes.
This is a very, all the steps are very sacred, but this is a very sacred step to maintain that confidence of somebody else's and, basically die with that information.
To me, also one of the things that really makes someone highly skilled at listening to that fifth step is the ability to really listen to people's words and reflect those words back to them. If we know how to listen, people will always tell us exactly what the core problem is. We don't have to figure it out. We just need to listen to their words. It's encoded in those words. And if we know how to listen and reflect those back, if someone's in the denial process in the middle of it, and they say, well, and this person was just so snotty and no, it's like, okay, so let's go back to now. When have you been snotty? Tell me about that. and just, bingo, there it is. There it is.
Yes.
And that
Absolutely.
goes back to the first century. You go back to Romans where they say, beware you who judge another, or that in which you judge another. You have been guilty of practicing.
Absolutely.
How could they say that? Because you got to have the brain cells before you can see it. As it's said popularly, I think, in the 12-step programs, if you spot it, you got it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, can't see it without the brain cells. It's a bummer, isn't it?
It is a bummer. It can be a bummer, but it could also be what sets us free by seeing it and acknowledging
the good news and the bad news.
You got it, but you could get rid of it. But anyway,
there you go.
We continue on to 6 and 7. That is pretty quick. And I just want to point out that 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 are coupling steps. 6 and 7 go together, 8 and 9 go together. And 6 and 7 would be, and I wanted to say it perfectly, but I don't have my page open, is that we, in step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And then step 7 is we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And the reason why I call them coupling steps is in step 6, we become willing, and in step 7, we do. Same thing for 8 and 9. And 8, we become willing to make amends to them all. And then in step 9, we make amends. And the words character defects and shortcomings, a lot of people didn't know what these were. And I was listening for the longest time. I was listening to Joe and Charlie, who are circuit speakers for Alcoholics Anonymous. They said that they didn't know what they meant either. And then they finally went back to a relative of the lady that Bill Wilson was doing dictation to write the manuscript for the big book. And she said that they're errors in thought, they're thinking errors. One of the little quirks that Bill Wilson had is that he took a night course after he fought in World War I, and he came home, obviously a veteran, at a very young age, and he started to go to night school. And when he went to night school and took his English class or his composition class, his teacher told him that he was an idiot because he repeated too many words. So what he does in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and a lot of people curse him, is that he uses all different kind of words. He most definitely got his thesaurus out and changed all the words up. And so basically character defects and shortcomings are the same. And that they're thoughts in error, or errors in thought, and we ask God to remove these because we can't work on them. If we start to work on them, then it's basically ego or working on ego or self working on self, or what Albert Einstein says, that the mind that caused the problem can't solve it. It would be working on our character defects is trying to maintain that same mind. So asking them to have them removed is what we do in 6 and 7. Become willing and then do it. And there is a prayer. There is a question in step 6, and the question in step 6 is, are we ready to let go of what we have found is objectionable? So we see our character defects in the 4th column in the resentment part of the 4th step. We talk about them in step 5, and then we get to the place we ask ourselves, are we ready to let go of these? And I ask myself this every day: am I ready to let go of everything that I find that is objectionable? And it's usually a resounding hell yeah. The only thing that I want to hang on to is my sarcasm. I like it. But the rest of the character defects, I am willing to let go of. And then there.
So let me throw a thought in here.
Okay.
I'd offer the reason why so many people utilize sarcasm is because it's one of the most powerful non-substance drugs that there is.
Oh, it's a drug.
Sarcasm is our culture's socially acceptable way of expressing otherwise unexpressible rage. And rage is the deepest level of hostility as a drug that there is. So when one can come up with that cutting remark, it's very much tied to a deep sense of rage that, as it shows up in the structure chemically, is a very powerful anesthetic. And the clock just told me that we're down to about 60 seconds, so
okay.
Maybe we can hold that thought